Hey everyone, my name is Alex and this is DMP for That's My Podcast. I know there's plenty of podcasts out there, but if you're looking to have a laugh about some of my fails, hear some hot takes, and listen to some random thoughts and about the life of a 20-something-year-old where I'm just trying to enjoy it, then you came to the right place. And hopefully if you weren't looking for something like that, you'll still stay because I'm sure at some point I'm going to go off on some random tangent that will interest you. I'm going to be releasing a new episode every other Sunday, and if you ever want to hear something specific, feel free to DM me on Instagram at That's My Podcast or tweet me at That's My Podcast. But today, I'm going to be getting straight into it. Let's talk about jobs. I know this topic seems really boring, but it just passed my 1 year anniversary at my job, and I thought it would be cool to kind of talk about how my life changed since I got it and honestly what led me to the path that I'm on now. Just to give a little background, I grew up in a small town and also very religious, which both of those things we can kind of get on at another episode because it's a lot. But money and careers were not really pushed. Honestly, it's safe to say that I was pushed in the opposite way, in the sense that I was told not to go to college and not to put a lot of time into finding a job that I truly like. That just kind of going through the motions and trying to pay the bills and keep your head above water is just something that we'll just always have to deal with, even if we aren't happy. And don't get me wrong, sometimes that can be the case. But after working 5 years of food service at McDonald's and 2 years as a manager at Target in retail, I do not think that we should ever be miserable with our jobs. If it is strongly affecting your mental or physical health, where you have no energy or even just the will to do something after or before work, then it's just not it. I remember being at Target and let's say I would work like 12 to 9. I used to like not wake up until like 11:30. I would literally rush to get ready. And first of all, I was literally late every single shift almost for a long time. I don't know how I got away with it, but I did. But I would get ready, wake up, get ready, go to work. At the end of my shift, like 9, let's say I would maybe walk around and talk to people until like 9:30 because like I was friends with a lot of people at work. But even if anybody like invited me to do something afterwards, for like the longest time, I didn't even say yes or even go do anything. I would just go home and then go back to sleep. And then I would just do that and it would just be a cycle. I would just be going through the motions where literally all that I did in life was work. And I think that's one way that we can kind of get stuck and stay at the job that we're at. It's just like if you get in a cycle, you kind of feel like you're in a hole. And sometimes it's kind of like hard to describe or realize that you're in it, but you just have to you just have to try to be self-aware and realize like, I don't know, my wake up call was just realizing that I truly wasn't happy. And I was trying to think like, oh, what if I like lost my job at Target? It's like, what would I have? And because I wasn't working on myself or my mental health, I wasn't working on a lot of the friendships that I had there for a long time. I literally would have had nothing. And it's like, I don't want to just have my job to show. But there's a lot of other reasons of why you might get stuck. One might just be because you feel like this one job is better than the last job that you had. Or maybe the pay is good. You're able to pay your bills and maybe you struggled in the past. And so you just don't even feel the need to try to change it up. Or maybe you're just nervous to change up in general. You don't want to take that chance because you don't really know what's going to happen. But let me be the one to tell you that if someone else hasn't already, that those are not good enough reasons to sacrifice your health or your time just to stay stagnant at a place that you're not happy with. There's always going to be something better. And it might not be the next job that you get or the next thing that you try. But if you do really want it, then you're going to find it because you're not going to stop until you do. Money really comes and goes, and you'd be surprised at how much you can get with just being confident and staying true to yourself and even negotiating. This kind of comes into play more with like salary jobs. any type of like freelance, things like that. But I didn't really learn about negotiating until I was getting the job that I'm in now. And I remember like they always ask you in like those positions, like, oh, like they let you start it out almost. They're like, okay, how much were you expecting for this job or like to have for this position? And honestly, whenever I got the job that I'm in now, I had no idea what to say. I talked to my brother about it, and he was just like, just look up the average salary and then just ask for the average, or like maybe even the high end of average. And I remember on the call, that's what I did when I got my offer. And they're like, oh, we were thinking this number. And it was even higher than I even asked. So it's just like wild to think about, what if I maybe would have even asked for more? Like people do it all the time and they end up getting it. So, don't be nervous to not sell yourself short. Like if you know your worth, like express it and tell them that, and they're going to see that. And if they do really want you, which like if they're already offering you the position, then just go for it. See what happens. And you know what? When you try something new too, you just never know what might happen, not just money wise. You might end up making more money than you ever thought, but on the other side of that too, you might meet more people than you ever thought. People in different cultures, people doing different things. You might learn a whole nother skill that you never thought you want. You might even meet the love of your life. You just never know. And nowadays, there are more options than ever to make money and to make a difference. No matter what your passions are, you can pretty much find something or create something that's going to make you happy. I mean, the different influencer positions that we have available to us these days, I know it seems like maybe like impossible that you couldn't do it, but there's so many out there. I mean, people are literally selling anything, and people are just posting pictures. Maybe they're posting reels, like, shoot, the TikTokers that have become famous at like literally age like 15 just because they're doing some dances. Like if they can do it, then you can do it. Really, I know you look at somebody and you might think like, oh, that can never be me. But honestly, like even if we don't realize it or we don't think of them in that way, like everybody that we see on our social media, they're literally just like us. Like, there might be some people that were born into maybe more wealthy families or where the options are more readily available for them. But in the end, everybody that has gotten to the position that they're in, even if it is high up, they're literally just a human, just like you. So honestly, no matter what you want to do, as long as you're going to be passionate and stick with it, you can do it. And something that talked about that was in the book that I read. It's called Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. If you haven't heard of it, you should definitely look at it, maybe get it on Audible, something like that. But something that he talks about in it is your dharma. He describes your dharma as using your natural inclinations, or maybe like your passions, what you thrive at, and using that to serve others. So pretty much figuring out what you like to do and what you're truly passionate about, what you want to do for like ever, and figuring out a way to make that into a career and in a way that will help others. And something else that he said that really stuck with me is that your dharma will support you if you support your dharma. So it's not always going to be where it's a straight path, and you might have to protect your dharma in the sense of like people might say something rude, or people might not support you always for doing what you truly want to do, because you're going to be doing something different. And anytime you do something different, you don't really know the reaction that you might get. But honestly, it just talked about how if you're willing to support your dharma, then no matter what, it's going to support you back, and you're going to be able to be getting something from it. And that kind of goes along into my next point, that the world has taught us all of our lives that you really have to fit into this certain box or follow a certain timeline. And that's just not true. It's never too late, and you don't have to follow what everyone else does to be successful. I mean, truly think about, like, what does success look to you? And when you're picturing it, what aspects do you even want from that picture? Something that someone very important to me taught me when I started getting to know him was nothing is actually impossible. Like, here I was with once of modeling, inspiring others, doing different troubleshooting, creating, styling, dancing, but I was working 11 to 8, like every day, 6 days a week, because I dropped out of my college and this job gave me good enough money. Honestly, at this point, I really did just feel lost, and I was living with my parents. I don't know, I had lost a lot of different things in my life, and I didn't really know what path to go on, because the initial path that I thought I was going to be on in life, it didn't work out for me. And that was more for religious reasons, but I just found myself in a place that I never thought I was going to be in. And so what I did personally was I reached out to my oldest brother, who's in tech, and I asked him for advice. He gave me info on a coding boot camp called the 1150 Academy. And that day, I looked it up online. I scheduled like a meeting, like a little webinar with them. And wildly enough, it happened so fast. I enrolled that week and literally started a month later. So this was a 12-week fully immersive program with over 500 hours of coding time to be a software developer. And I don't know if I truly knew that I wanted to be a software developer, but I knew that being in tech and finding a job where I could possibly, work from home, where I'd be getting a good salary without having to really always be on my feet. I just knew that was going to be a step in the right direction. I still didn't even really know what path I wanted to be on, but I just knew that this was one step closer in the right way. I don't know how I knew that, but I just figured, I can't go wrong. What I'm doing, I'm not happy with, so why not just do something completely different? And honestly, I was surprised with myself because I made this decision to join this boot camp without even talking to my boss at Target. I really did not know what I was going to do, because in order for me to get the help needed to get my school paid for, this coding boot camp, I had to go full time. So here I was left with kind of a decision. I definitely didn't have the money to pay for the boot camp myself. They did have different payment plans, but why would I do that if I could get it all paid for just by figuring out a way that I could still work and go to this coding boot camp full time? It didn't necessarily go over amazingly with my boss, but honestly, I didn't really want to care because I knew this was going to be a step in the right direction for me. Unfortunately, though, I did have to care because I wasn't able to really pay my bills with no job. So I ended up working 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. 3 days a week, and then 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. every single weekend while I was doing my coding bootcamp lectures from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And that's why I say sometimes to get what you want, you have to do things that you don't love, but you have to look at them as stepping stones. This schedule wasn't permanent for me, and that's literally the only thing that kept me going, because I would truly be lying if I said that doing that schedule was easy. I literally pulled all-nighters to get my work done, and I said no to my friends for the first time in forever to actually do stuff with them. This was whenever I started actually finding kind of the group that I was hanging out with, and they were doing a bunch of fun things. This was the same time that I was turning 21, and here I was sitting at home doing pre-work for my coding boot camp when they're literally come out to the bars, this is going to be your first time ever. And I remember the first time that I ended up going to the bar with them, I literally was trying to get something done with my pre-work so I didn't have to stress about it. And literally, they kept on texting me, and I ended up not going out until midnight to go hang out with them. And the bar literally closed to 1:30 or 2. So by the time I got there, I only had an hour left with them. But it was nice that they still stayed and celebrated with me. But what I'm trying to get to is just that you might end up doing things that you don't want to do, and you have to be self-disciplined. This isn't going to be the road where, I guess, think of it as I don't know if it's called this wherever you are at, but there's this amusement park close to where I'm from called Holiday World, and they have this thing there called the Lazy River. And literally, you just grab a tube and you just sit on the tube and you just go on the Lazy River. The current literally just takes you wherever you want, and you just chill there on your tube. You get a tan, it's super relaxing, other than when the kids are jumping in your face. But if you choose to follow your passion, it's not going to be like that. It's not going to be super easy. You aren't just going to be able to go through the motions and be going in the direction that you want to be going in. But that's okay, and eventually once you figure out that routine that works for you, where you're able to start investing into yourself, then you pretty much have it. Like, it's a lot easier from there. But it's just that initial going against the grain. But going back to after my coding boot camp, so I made it through, I passed, but now this was honestly the hard part, going through that applying and interview process to actually get a job. So they had career services, or they had people called career services work with you. So pretty much you would meet with them every week. Now, they wouldn't just find a job for you. You really had to do everything that you normally would. Like, they helped me set up my LinkedIn. They helped me revise my resume once I made that. They told me about cover letters, how to email them, different companies as thank yous and different stuff like that, just to make you stand out. So they gave a lot of tips, but you had to meet with them every week, and then they would send you different jobs that they found, and you would also talk to them about different jobs that you applied for. Now, I don't want to spend the rest of this episode talking about the interview process. So if that's something that you all want to hear about, then I will definitely talk more about it. But long story short, I believe it was 3 months of applying and interviewing, and tech jobs, your interviews are you have 3 or 4 interviews before you actually get the position. And at this point, I was working at Target still, and I had to go back to my old schedule to stay a team lead. That's the whole reason why I ended up working that much. I didn't necessarily need to work that many hours while I was doing my coding boot camp, but I had to keep the position I was in and to stay at the Target that I was working at. And otherwise, since I was a team lead, if I would go to a team member, then I would have had to transfer targets. And I honestly just didn't want that. And so once I did finish my coding boot camp, I literally had to go immediately back into the schedule that I was working beforehand, because they're only able to really work with me for, a certain amount of time. And 3 months was pretty generous for them. So I had to go back to working, pretty much all day since it was mid-shift, and doing that almost every day. So if you have applied for a lot of jobs, you know that the best times to interview, most of the time what they offer is going to be noon, or I guess not noon because it's lunch, but you know what I mean, around that time, maybe 2, pretty much all the retail busy times. So I remember I would wait to take my, we got 15-minute breaks, and then your lunch, and then you got a second 15-minute break. And I remember I would wait to take my 15 or wait to take my lunch until I would have an interview scheduled. And much, it was just a lot of juggling my time and really just grinding. It just was not easy even once I got past the coding boot camp, because I still had to make sure that, just because I had a day off did not mean I had a day off. I was still going to coffee shops, and I wasn't just sitting. I was literally still applying for jobs, having my meetings with career services, going through my interviews. Now it has literally all paid off, because after 3 interviews with the company that I'm at now, I'm able to make 6 figures at a company that lets me have a flexible schedule. I work with a wonderful team, and the job is honestly right up my alley. Now, is it my dream job? I can't really say that, but it has truly changed my life. I get to work from home with the freedom to get my work done and more, and still have plenty of time to then work on stuff for myself. And that's kind of what I talked about earlier. Being able to really invest in yourself, build your brand, and do things to set yourself up where eventually you won't even have to work at all, really. That's kind of where I'm at now. Um, so, what I really want to do is, be able to inspire others. I want to do modeling. I obviously want to do this podcast. I want to do fashion, design, and really like build a brand and a community where people feel like they can, express themselves and try to be themselves without feeling like everybody's judging them and looking at them in a certain way. I want people to be able to kind of like look back at my experiences and see what might work for them and what may not work for them without them even having to waste their time. I just want people to know that like life can be enjoyable and it can be great and it can be amazing and it can be worth it, but you're in control of that. Life is going to be what you make it, truly, no matter what you get dealt with. People might get dealt an easier hand than the others, but no matter what, like just because you might have life a little bit easier than someone else does not mean that you enjoy life even more. You have to do that for yourself. And like I said, people may look at you weird if you do go against the grain. It's not all going to be smooth, but it really will pay off. I don't have any idea where I'll be in one more year, but I do know my goals, and I'm doing my best to stay true to that. I'll have to do another episode on goals and routines, and maybe that'll even help myself. But you'd be surprised at just how much more you can gain by staying open-minded, saying yes to those doors that open. And if one does close, just not being super discouraged, to keep on going. Because I can tell you that I am normally a person where I have to stick to a plan. And if things don't go the way I want them to, then I get frustrated or I want to give up. And that just isn't going to work for you long term. I can tell you that much. I'm definitely having to change that a lot in myself now. And I think in the past, I may not have got as stuck as I was if I wouldn't have thought like that. So just trying to stay open-minded and realize that if something doesn't work out the way you want it to, maybe it was not meant to work out that way, but that you can still make the most out of it. So I guess in conclusion to my whole spiel about jobs is just don't stay stuck. No company cares more about you than you. So work for what you really want. I mean, there's a lot of podcasts out there, and no one is saying that I'm going to succeed, but one episode down and plenty more to come, and we'll see what happens.